The road narrowed as it climbed the mountain, turning from smooth pavement into cracked stone. Fog rolled low between the trees, thick enough to dull sound. The engine felt too loud here, so I turned it off and let the car coast the last few meters. When it stopped, the silence rushed in. Even the wind felt careful. The inn stood at the end of the road, half hidden by cedar trees. Its roof sagged slightly under years of snow and rain. Dark wood beams crossed its walls like ribs. As I stepped out of the car, the building made a low sound wood, shifting, slow and deep. It reminded me of breathing. I had come looking for quiet. That was all I told myself. Quiet and distance from the city, from the room that still smelled. Like hospital soap, from the name I could not say out loud yet. The locals in the village below had looked at me strangely when I asked about the inn. One old woman tightened her scarf and said I should not stay past midnight. A man at the bus stop shook his head and laughed once, sharp and nervous. No one explained more. I walked up the stone steps. Each step was worn smooth, like many feet had passed here and never fully left. The front door slid open with a dry sound. Warm air brushed my face. Inside, the light was low. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, their glow soft and yellow, like fading embers. The bell at the desk rang as I stepped forward. No one had touched it. A moment passed, then another. From behind a screen, a man appeared. He bowed slightly, his smile polite and practiced. His hair was grey, pulled back neatly. His eyes did not quite meet mine. "You are early," he said. "I didn't see a time," I replied. He nodded, as if that explained everything. He handed me a key with a small wooden tag. The number was carved by hand. When I asked how many guests were staying, he paused. "Just you," he said. "Tonight." The floorboards creaked as I followed him down the hall. The sound echoed longer than it should have, like the space was larger than it looked. Doors lined the hallway, each one closed. As we passed them, I felt a strange sense of weight, like someone standing just behind the paper walls. The innkeeper stopped at one door and slid it open. The room was simple. Tatami mats, a low table, a single window facing the trees. Fog pressed against the glass, moving slowly like something alive. The air smelled faintly of old wood and incense. "If you need anything," he said, already stepping away. I watched him leave. When his footsteps faded, the inn felt even quieter. Too quiet. I sat on the floor and set my bag down. My hands shook. Slightly, I told myself it was the cold. As night came, the lantern light seemed to shrink. Shadows grew thicker in the corners of the room. I ate a small meal brought by the innkeeper, who did not stay long enough for conversation. When I thanked him, he smiled again, the same careful smile, and closed the door gently behind him. Later, as I lay on the futon, I heard it again. The breathing sound. Slow, steady. The walls made soft clicks, like joints moving. Somewhere down the hall, a footstep creaked. Then another. I sat up, listening. No voices followed. No doors opened. The bell at the desk rang once, clear, sharp. I stood and slid my door open. The hallway was empty. Lanterns flickered gently. I walked toward the stairs, my steps careful. Halfway there, I stopped. The sound of footsteps came. From above, slow and even, as if someone was descending. I waited. Nothing appeared. I went back to my room and closed the door. Sleep came in pieces, dreams without shape. At some point, I woke to a sound like paper rubbing together. Soft whispers filled the room. I could not make out words, only the feeling of them. Like memories pressed flat, trying to speak. I held my breath. The air felt heavy, but not angry. It felt patient. Morning light crept in through the window, pale and thin. The fog had lifted slightly. Birds called from somewhere far away. I felt tired, but calmer, as if something had watched over me while I slept. I stepped into the hallway and froze. A door stood at the far end. It had not been there before. The wood was darker than the others, the frame older. Paper talismans were stuck across it, yellowed with age. Ink symbols had faded but were still clear enough to see. The air around the door felt colder. The hallway seemed to lean toward it. I walked closer, my steps slow. The floor creaked under my weight. The talismans fluttered slightly, though there was no wind. The innkeeper appeared behind me. I had not heard him approach. "That door was not here last night," I said. He did not look at it. His gaze stayed fixed on the floor. "Some doors show themselves," he replied. "What's inside?" He shook his head once. "It must stay closed." I wanted to ask more. The words pressed against my throat, but something in his voice stopped. Me, fear, maybe, or shame. As he walked away, I noticed his shoulders were tense, like he carried something heavy every day and never set it down. I stood alone in the hallway. The door remained silent, still, yet I felt certain it was aware of. The inn breathed softly around us, and I knew I would not be leaving as soon as I had planned. Morning light entered the inn slowly, as if unsure it was welcome. It slid through the paper windows in pale strips and rested on the floor. The air smelled clean but old, like wood that had dried for decades. I sat up on the futon, listening. The inn was quiet. No footsteps, no bell. Only the soft sound of trees moving outside. I stepped into the hallway. The strange door from yesterday was still there at the far end. The talismans lay flat against the wood now, calm and still. I did not move toward it. Not yet. Daytime made the inn look smaller, less threatening. The lanterns were out, and sunlight filled the halls. Still, something felt off. Sound traveled strangely here. A footstep echoed twice. A cough seemed to disappear before it finished. I walked past empty rooms. Their doors were open, as if waiting. Inside, everything was neat. Futons folded, tables wiped clean. No dust. I stepped into one room and knelt on the tatami mat. It was warm. I lifted my hand and pressed it flat against the floor. The warmth stayed. I stood and backed away slowly. In the next room, a radio sat on a low shelf. Old, scratched. I did not remember seeing it the night before. When I turned the knob, it crackled to life. Static filled the room, thick and loud. Then voices came through. They were faint, broken, speaking in tones too low to understand. I turned the dial, but the sound stayed the same. No music, no clear words, just voices, layered and distant, like a crowd heard through walls. I turned, the radio off. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Near the stairs, I found a small desk with books stacked neatly beneath it. Guest logs. Their covers were worn, corners bent from use. I opened the first one. Names filled the pages. Careful writing. Dates next to each entry. Some names were crossed out, not scratched, crossed with steady lines. I flipped through more. Pages the same dates appeared again and again. Different names. Same days. No notes for departure. No reasons given. At the back of one book, a final column was left blank. Deaths, perhaps, or something else no one wanted to write down. The innkeeper stood at the end of the hall when I looked up. He watched me quietly. "People stayed here a long time," I said. He nodded. "Longer than planned." "Yes." I closed the book. "Why?" He did not answer right away. He moved closer, his steps slow. He picked up one of the logs and ran, his hand over the cover. "During the famine," he said, "this inn stayed open. People came from the mountains, from villages that no longer had food. You gave them shelter. We tried. And after..." His hand tightened on the book. "After, people came for different reasons. To disappear," I said. He did not deny it. That night, the inn felt different. The quiet pressed closer. The lantern light seemed weaker. I ate alone again. The food tasted good, but I barely noticed. When I lay down, sleep did not come. I stared at the ceiling, watching shadows shift with the movement of trees outside. The breathing sound returned, slow, careful. Then I heard crying. It was soft, controlled, like someone trying not to be heard. The sound passed through the walls, thin but clear. It did not rise or fall. It stayed steady, patient, endless. I sat up. The crying stopped. I waited. It began again, closer this time. I slid the door open and stepped into the hall. The floor was cold under my feet. The sound came from the far end, near the sealed door. Each step I took made the crying pause, then continue, as if it was listening to. I stopped a few feet away. The talismans trembled, just slightly. The paper lifted and fell like something breathing behind them. I reached out but did not touch the door. "I hear you," I whispered. The crying did not grow louder. It did not stop. It stayed the same. I returned to my room and closed the door. Sleep came suddenly, heavy and deep. I dreamed of a woman kneeling on a wooden floor. Her back was straight. Her hands were red. Blood soaked into the boards beneath. Her fingers. She did not cry out. She did not look up. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, as if she was waiting for permission to move. When I woke, my face was wet. Morning came quietly again. I sat on the futon, breathing slowly. The dream stayed with me. The warmth of the mats, the crossed-out names, the patient crying. The inn was not angry. It was lonely. I stood and looked toward the hallway, toward the door that should not exist. Something here had been left behind, and it was still waiting for someone to listen. Rain began in the afternoon, light at first, tapping the roof like fingers testing a door. By evening, it had thickened into a steady fall. Wind pushed through the trees and struck the inn in long breaths. The mountain disappeared behind a wall of grey. There would be no leaving tonight. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out. The inn fell into a deeper quiet. Lanterns were lit by hand and placed along the halls. Their glow was weak against the dark. Shadows stretched and moved as the flame shook. The smell of oil mixed with damp wood. I sat in my room, listening. The storm wrapped the building on. All sides. Rain drummed on the roof. Wind pressed against the walls. The inn answered back with low sounds beams tightening, floors shifting. It felt less like a building and more like a body adjusting to pain. I stepped into the hallway. The air was cooler now. Each breath showed faintly in front of me. The sealed door waited at the far end. The talismans were no longer still. They lifted and fell, slow and uneven, like lungs struggling for air. A crack of thunder rolled across the mountain. The lantern nearest the door went out. The paper seals peeled back on their own. The door slid open. I did not touch it. I did not call out. The opening was narrow, just wide enough to see inside. The room beyond was small. No furniture, no window, only bare boards underfoot. A dark stain marked the center of the floor. It was old, deep. The wood around it had soaked the color, until it could not be scrubbed away. I stepped closer. The air inside the room felt heavier, as if it pressed against my chest. Another flash of lightning lit the space. For a moment, the stain looked wet. I knelt and ran my hand over the floor near it. The boards were cold, too cold. I pressed harder. One plank shifted slightly. Beneath it was a folded sheet of paper. My fingers shook as I opened it. The writing was faded but careful. Each line was tight, as if the writer had little room or time. The letter spoke of winter, of snow piled higher than the doors, of guests who arrived thin and desperate, of blame that moved through the inn like sickness. Crops failed, children fell ill. Someone needed to carry the weight of it. She had worked here, cleaned rooms, served. Meals, listened. They said misfortune followed her. They locked her away to keep the rest safe. Her name appeared once, then was crossed out. The letter ended mid-sentence. Thunder shook the walls. The lanterns flickered again. Somewhere nearby, something pressed back. The crying returned, louder now. It came from the floor itself, from the walls, from the space between breaths. I stood in the center of the room as the sound wrapped around. Me, it was not loud. It did not beg. It simply existed, steady and unending. I felt it then. Not a shape, not a face, a weight, like someone standing too close behind me. Like memory pressing down, my chest tightened. Images passed through me without words. Cold nights, hunger that burned more than pain, silence that stretched for days. The waiting, I sank to the floor. I know, I said, though I was not sure. What I meant, the pressure eased slightly. The crying softened. The storm outside roared on, but the room felt strangely still, as if listening. Footsteps approached. The innkeeper stood in the doorway, lantern raised. His face looked older in the low light. "You should not be here," he said. "You knew," I replied. He did not argue. "She was forgotten," I said. "On purpose." He nodded once. People feared what they could not control. And now, the innkeeper looked around the room. His shoulders sagged. Now it remembers, he said. Another crack of thunder shook the mountain. Rain found its way through gaps in the roof, dripping softly onto the floor. The stain did not change. The presence grew stronger. Not angry, not cruel, just close, too close. It filled the room until there was no space left to breathe. My hands pressed against the floor, as if holding myself in place. "I hear you," I said again. Louder this time. The crying stopped. The pressure remained. I stayed there until the storm began to pass, until the wind loosened its grip, until the rain softened to a steady fall. When I stood, my legs felt weak. The innkeeper closed the door. Gently. He did not replace the talismans. Sleep did not come easily that night. When it did, it brought no dreams, only a deep, heavy stillness. Morning light returned pale and thin. The storm had moved on, leaving the mountain washed and quiet. The inn stood as it always had, but something had shifted. The air felt less tight, less strained. The sealed door remained open. I knew then that nothing here wanted to harm me. It wanted to be seen, and now that I had listened, there would be no turning away. Night did not move forward. It stayed where it was, stretched thin across the inn. The lantern outside my room burned low, its flame steady but tired. I did not lie down. I sat with my back against the wall, knees pulled close, listening to the slow sounds of the building. The breathing was softer now. I spoke into the room, not knowing if anyone could hear me. My voice sounded small, like it might fall apart before it reached the walls. "I'm sorry," I said. The word felt plain. Not heavy, not holy, just honest. I waited. Nothing answered. No crying. No pressure. The silence felt different than before, less tight. The air warmed slightly, as if a door somewhere had been closed against the cold. I spoke again, not louder. "I know you were alone." The lantern flame lifted, just a little. The shadows pulled back from the corners. I stayed where I was, letting the words come slowly, one at a time. I did not explain. I did not promise anything. I only spoke what felt true. The room began to fill with something else. Not a presence, not a figure. Sensation. Cold fingers. A hard floor. Hunger that did not fade with sleep. Long hours without voices. Doors that never opened. I felt it pass through me like wind through an open window. Tears came without warning. I wiped them away with the back of my hand. My chest hurt, but the pain was gentle, like pressure easing after a long hold. "I hear you," I said. The inn answered with a low sound, not a groan, a settling, wood finding its place. I stayed awake until the dark thinned into early grey. When morning came, it did not rush. Light crept in slowly, careful not to disturb what had been said. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. The innkeeper stopped outside my door. "You did not sleep," he said. "I stayed," I replied. He nodded once. His face looked worn, like someone who had been carrying a weight too long. In the sealed room, the air felt changed, still heavy, but not closed. The stain on the floor looked duller in the daylight. The boards around it no longer felt cold. The innkeeper knelt and pressed his hand flat against the floor. He closed his eyes. "My grandfather told me," he said, "but only." Once, he spoke quietly, of winters that did not end, of fear turning inward, of a choice made to protect many by sacrificing one. He said her name stopped being used after that, as if silence could erase what happened. No prayer worked, he said. No monk stayed long. There was nothing to drive away. I understood. Then, nothing here was trapped. It had chosen to stay. We did not light incense. We did not chant. We sat on the floor and spoke her name aloud. Once, then again, letting the sound settle into the wood, into the walls. The floor creaked softly beneath us. Not in protest. In release, the room felt lighter, not empty, just less burdened. As we stood to leave, I felt it again. Not behind me, around me, watching. Calm, the innkeeper bowed low. Outside, the mountains stood clear under the morning sky. Something here had been remembered, and something was still deciding. Morning light moved through the inn like a careful guest. It touched the walls without pressing, slid across the floor without weight. The air felt warmer, though the mountain was still cold. The building no longer held itself tight. Its breathing was slow and even. I woke before the bell rang. From my room, I heard voices. Real ones, low and ordinary. Footsteps crossed the hall. A door opened. Luggage brushed against wood. The inn was filling again. I sat up and listened. No crying, no whispers, only the sounds of people beginning their day. Cups placed on tables. Water poured. Soft laughter, unsure and brief, like people who did not yet trust the quiet. I stepped outside my room. A young couple passed me, smiling politely. They bowed and kept walking. They did not glance at the end of the hall. They did not slow near the sealed room, now unsealed, its door resting open as if it had always belonged there. The innkeeper stood near the entrance. He was dressed neatly, hands folded in front of him. His eyes followed the guests as they moved, then settled on me. "You are leaving today," he said. "Yes." He nodded, as if confirming something already decided. Breakfast was served in the common room. Steam rose from bowls. The smell of rice and broth filled the space. Sunlight reached the center of the room for the first time since I arrived. It felt earned. I ate slowly. Each bite stayed with me. Across the room, guests spoke in hushed voices, respectful without knowing why. A child traced patterns on the table with one finger. The radio played softly. No static, no broken voices. Just music, thin and clear. After breakfast, I packed my bag. It felt lighter than when I arrived, though nothing had been removed. When I stepped into the hall, the innkeeper waited near the door. He held a small wooden plaque in his hands. "I will place this today," he said. The plaque was simple. Smooth wood, one name carved into it. No dates, no explanation. "She does not need one," he added. I nodded. He set the plaque near the entrance, just inside the door. Not hidden, not raised high. At eye level, easy to miss, easy to see. Guests passed it without stopping. Some glanced at it and moved on. One woman paused for a moment, then bowed slightly. unsure why she felt the need to. The inn did not react. No creak, no shift. It held the moment quietly. I walked once more to the sealed room. The stain remained. It always would, but it no longer pulled the air inward. The floorboards were warm, steady. The room felt full, but not crowded. I stood there for a long moment. "I'm going," I said. Softly, there was no answer. But the space did not feel empty when I turned away. Outside, the mountain road waited. Fog clung to the trees, thinner now, lifting as the sun climbed. I bowed once at the door. The innkeeper returned the gesture. "Will it stay?" I asked. He considered the question. "It already has," he said. I stepped onto the road. Gravel shifted under my shoes. With each step away, the inn grew smaller, but it did not fade. It stood firm among the trees, roof dark against the sky, breathing slow and deep. As I walked, the truth settled into me, quiet and clear. Some places are not cursed. They are wounded. They hold pain because no one stopped long enough to listen. They repeat themselves because they were never answered. They do not seek fear. They seek recognition. The inn would continue. Guests would come and go. Stories would be told and softened over time. Children would run down the halls. Laughter would return, and beneath it all, something would remain. Not a ghost, a memory. Those who listened would feel it. A pause in their step, a warmth underfoot, a sense of being watched without threat. Those who did not would still carry it. With them, a feeling they could not name, a quiet weight that followed them down the mountain. The inn stood as it always had, not as a warning, as a witness. And for the first time in a long while, it was no longer alone.